So thank you for this very rich, intense morning session. It was also a good opportunity for me to delve deeper in your presentations that I received beforehand. All that's very interesting, and I tried to kind of discover cross-cutting themes, transversal themes, based on the very specific case studies to kind of extend that to broader themes, and think that really you're the ideal persons for this effort. My questions, I'm going to address three main themes: cultural divides, temporal divides, and that of the beholder. So for the first thing, the first set of questions, Prakash is not with us, but I can extend it to everyone. I would put that question to Ondine. What can be compared, and by taking your experience as reverse ethnography, the case studies and the templates that you've adopted as an analytical template, what are the continuities, the resonances, and the important breakthroughs brought by modernity? And I'd also focus on modernity. Is there modernity? Should we speak of several modernities? And is contemporaneity necessarily modern? So that's several questions in one. Firstly, I refrained from comparing, but really setting things up against each other in one space. It's very important for me in order to note the similarities and also to highlight the differences, but never with an eye to comparing them. As regards modernity, I'm not sure that I fully understand your question. There's no microphone, unfortunately. No, we speak of modernity, but often we confuse it with contemporaneousness. Modernity is a specific way of applying it to contemporaneity. The Western paradigm, we think of one modernity, but that shows this syncretism, this modernity of the past. It's perhaps a way of that there are also several ways of being contemporaneous. And I have the impression almost of being modern. There's this Western modernity that we know, but also to be modern would be to live with one's territory, one environment rooted in it, and perhaps to discard this technological modernity to seek out others. And what does it mean to be modern, if not to call into question our paradigms? And do you think that it's possible to adopt a sort of iconological reading of water based on water systems to describe and to understand the most profound characteristics of the society, the culture of water? When we delve into these territories, when we explore all these ties that are woven at the greater territory as well as the home, the dwelling, it's very interesting to explore these ties. And there's really a template that was activated, and as if a new world was appearing, and assessing it via water gives a somewhat offbeat perspective that's very enriching. Thank you. Anyone else wish to answer this question as Ondine has done? When you speak of modernity, in the case that I present, the case of the Gasmine orchards, I can speak of it in two ways. Firstly, if we consider modernity as a representation of this historical approach, that we need to go further as far as possible to move towards a better future. This progressive perspective that is really linked to modernity. And the case of Yasmin is very interesting, very practically. Youssef showed us that the farmers in Morocco are precisely seeking to go further, to increase the profit from their land, from their water. In the case of Yasmin, it's not at all the case for their garden. All gardeners have retained this attachment to these gardens that are not at all profitable, that emerge from this progressive world with not just seeking financial benefit or financial gain, and that's what is such that this system remains not at all profitable. I addressed with the students from the landscape school in Versailles. I did a study on that, and the students we worked on Yasmin and on the other projects, and they presented that for their teacher in hydrology, hydrologist, and the hydrologist said, "What is this system? It's not at all economical. Need other models, and if we have other models, this system won't remain and all the orchards will disappear." So I think it's important to have this perspective of modernity that takes us to this approach based on history and a progressive approach to try and derive as much benefit as possible from the land, from the water, from the resources. The case I presented is totally the opposite. The case of Morocco, it'd be interesting to focus on that. I think that you opened a big question, which I'll come to later, on the question of the progressive gaze. I'd like to introduce the second set of questions, core questions, the modern times, paraphrasing the Chaplin movie. In the intervention, there's sort of a praise of slowness and the quality of contact between the earth and the water, rather than saying that Monterey's cool, everything's stagnated, so we have kind of a flattened contemporaneousness, that is the quality of time and its sedimentation. So questions are as follows. Can we imagine the land without water and water without land? How can architecture today open up to this new link between molecular ties between water and land that seems to contain its frenzy? Can we perhaps look at the land without water and water without land? Is that your question? Because you cited a lot the work of Morisot of returning the land to water, and he talks at all about the quality of his contacts by also quoting Victor Schauberger, the earliest 20th century, that water must ripen, must mature, that it must, yes. But from the technical standpoint, I mean, the case that I showed is that because these orchards, these submerged orchards, the water infiltrates, seeps in, recharges the groundwater, and then the four species, pistachio, almond tree, apricot tree, and the vine, four have seep deep into the earth, 20 meters, searching, seeking out water, and that water, I add the term vegetation. The three together find their balance over time, over a long period of time, to forge a balanced ecosystem. If we transpose that temporality here, for example, how to rethink a new way of having architecture, not through formal innovation, but becomes sensitive to the quality of that time. What we're trying to develop at the architecture chair of water, and if we use the word architecture, it's not an architectural culture, it's in the broader sense, which is spatial planning or development. The orchards that I described is all part of spatial planning, water, because between spatial development, planning of the towns or the orchard, it's an intervention to create space, to develop it, to receive water, to live with water. And that's what we mean by architecture of water. It's not that the form follows this correlation between water, land, and vegetation. It's not an architectural form. The architecture follows those three entities, to merge them, to better combine them. And Kassim is really a very inspiring case in point. Does that answer your question? Yes. Youssef, Shabnan, you'd like to add anything? On this question of profitability, I said I got a comment, which is in fact, not all farmers are in this idea of modernity, and there's the same case also in Morocco, that is the farmers who grow in the terraces of the villages have this dual relationship. They're both urban and villagers. And they faced with the issues that what their crops aren't profitable. They're not doing it just to sell them. It's also linked to the value, to the culture in which they live. And land, water aren't just resources from which we extract riches or monetize as a form of pleasure, almost a form of honor in perpetuating these traditions. So I think this idea of cultural value that is perpetuated by the link with the world is, and that's where we can find forms of modernity, because it's those values that remain, that are combined, and that mix and meld with values in extractivism, etc., and it leads to the emergence of new things that are interesting to observe and explore. So, there are perhaps different ways of defining modernity, but the way I addressed it is more modernity is a thought system that emerged in the 17th century. And what, for me, was interesting, dualism, the ontological dualism, that vision of the dualism of the world that separated man from nature and also reduced nature to an infinite resource to exploit, and giving a central place to man, and also favored the consumer culture that goes with productivism, etc. And the tie that I can make between my presentation with the case in Morocco showed that there are also new irrigation systems, the drip by drip irrigation, and that can perhaps be more sustainable, but this culture of exploiting more, consuming more, doesn't lead or promote that sustainability, to address modernity and the collapse of our society, that we have to revisit our political, economic, social systems in order to think a more sustainable relationship with water. On the time issue, I address that at great length in all fields because it returns time and time again. The water cycle is there exacerbated, especially for small springs that dry up at the end of the summer. The constant reminder of cyclicity and of a time that is no longer linear, but that is part of the water cycle, questions our paradigms, how we prepare a project, over what time frame, 100 years. But if we say it's just covers one season, the perspective is different. There are other stages that in small irrigation projects, it's also very present in the orchard, the groundwater recharge times, and it shows the time frame. It gives a different perspective on the time frame. What's the time frame for a project today, in your view? Is it the water time frame of a political campaign? What's the time span? I haven't as yet. I'm not kind of a hands-on practitioner, but today it would be the water cycle time, but it's also an interweaving of cycles. I mean, the water cycle's going to be intertwined. It can go back a long way. Yankovic cycle, there are climate cycles that are even longer, that are interwoven. It's this interweaving of time spans that are more fluid and living would be the... Okay, I think, well, now we can perhaps turn to the major question, which leads to the third set of questions. Where is man in the sense of mankind? There's just a small premise here to better understand the meaning of the question that I'm putting to. As Shabman said in her introduction today, there's this idea that the Darwin Christian heritage cut man from his environment, considering that only species were a unit of survival. We created this split by eliminating the relational context, but we know that mankind is also a highly relational being and also very symbolic, has always sought resonance and confirmation in the environment with a real cosmological meaning. We saw that in the example shown through the mesological example of Persian gardens. It's almost an art, is how to think the world as see structures, to dig pockets in these structures to try and live. I think the Plato dialogue, where there are these three pioneers who go off to found the city of Magnes and discuss along the way of the form and on what values this city will be founded. It showed us before the town, the city, there's an idea of a town, of a city, something that's in the imagination of thought that then materialize. Rikver wrote about the idea of the town. So, to return to the question, in this day and age, are there other ways of narrating, talking about these water systems, not just the way, the functionalist way? Can we or not analyze the non-Occidental context in the same perspective as for a Western culture? I can also put all my cards on the table by saying, and cut to the chase, the water model. On what imagination is it based? What lies behind the myths, the cosmology, and what can be these new ritual forms of contact of water in contemporaneous times? I think what's interesting in all these tales and narratives, I mean, I tried to give a few examples to say that the tales are rooted in the reality between humans and their link. They've understood their existential link with their setting, with their environment. They've invented tales that exalt this ecological link. And these myths have also guided the Iranian people and human beings towards developments that are more in harmony with the limitations, the fragility and availability of water. And conversely, developments are understood through those myths and also have a symbolic dimension. And all these studies allow us to better analyze the ontological foundations of our relationship to the land. All our traditions are interesting, not just to return or to copy things of the past, but to open up a new understanding of the world, a new ontology to define our relationship to Earth. And it's interesting in that perspective to see that in the past, because the developments we're doing are strongly linked to the vision that society has of the world, and in the vision of the ancient Persians, that whole sets of structures that interact, that respond to one another and determine themselves. And that's really what we need today. That is to define our development projects linked to the availability of water, not just relying on our technological progress, inventions that give us power and a degree of freedom, but also take into account the limitations and weaknesses of these places, to think through these interdependencies. That's where we can learn from traditions. I would just follow up on that by saying that all these rides, imagination are based on an ecological reality. It's not just subjective, it's between subjectivity, objectivity, as was expounded. So how we can restore this subjectivity around water, an element that represents the major ecological concern of our society today. Take the example of the project that we undertook in the Comisoa. I presented it initially that was our starting point to do what they did in the past. We presented the final state of this project. It's a very dynamic community, great many organizations that are very active on this small territory, asking ourselves, what could we do between land planning, citizen involvement and public policies, because these are the three that we need to progress together to solve the water problem in a watershed. And we really understand, we realize that we can't go back on the development. It creates rituals or a sacred object. That's very difficult today. We can't do that. But in the way we live today, that for this territory, we have proposals, which is to develop a network of water watchers. What does that mean? We try and involve the inhabitants. Since the territory is suffering from drought with severe water shortages, no water in the river, that when they turn on the tap, there's still water. It comes from another watershed, but when the water comes out, they see there's no water in the river, so that involves them fully in the ecological reality of that territory. So we proposed developing such a network in which, well, first of all, the inhabitants could simply observe everything that is happening around the measuring rainfall, looking closely at everything that happens around the water and becoming more interesting. And that's what something that we started and we developed together. Kind of local education projects in high schools where the students through the national education system learn more. This local culture, this local pedagogy is lacking, and so they takes them out of their existing living conditions. And where could we begin such activities where school children, women could better understand this? Other spheres that try and connect our imagination to the reality of what is happening around us. It really does tie in what we're trying to create, something between the two, the imagination and subjectivity, objectivity.
Youssef, la dramaturgie du projet architectural.
Youssef, could you tell us a bit about the dramatic side, or the dramaturgy side of architecture? Sure, but before I do so, to touch on what was just said, it's not just the notion of environment as an ecology, but environment as a social tie. Because this ties back to the values I was talking about earlier, but also our relationship to time, linear time, as we understand it, and cyclical time. Very different relationships. The values in the city that you're talking about, they are radically different. Beyond this notion of progress, of speed, what is the guiding value behind our cities? What is the guiding principle of cities in the global south or in developing nations? And because when we're talking about development here, it has to be fast, it has to be accelerating. So this relationship with time is so important when thinking about any project. So when you're thinking of an architectural project which is based in linear time, it is almost doomed to failure, because you haven't placed it back in a cycle. A cycle can be short, mid-length, it can be a long cycle, but things need to be cyclical, because it means you don't have a global view of resource management, of material managing, and I think we have lost that. It ties back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the sacred aspect of architecture and design. Things really are interdependent. We can't separate one topic from the others. I agree with what you just said. I would like to touch on a different topic. To the south of Bethlehem, there is a township called Bâtir, and the notion of cyclical time is very present. resources is very important, because when talking about resources, we're talking about water. People need to agree as to how that water is going to be used. So therefore, water can become part of a project. And in bâtir, water is seen as a community shared product or resource. And it's highly local because it's just within a small community. It is a well which fills up overnight and is emptied throughout the day. And you have a person in charge of water using a stick with little notches in that stick. They can determine the depth of the water, and every day a measurement is taken of the water level to determine how much water is coming in and how much is being taken out of the system. And it varies throughout the year. It's not the same in the middle of the year as it is later on in the year. So it's very cyclical. And once they have incorporated, and generally speaking, once we incorporate cyclical natures of resources, which is very different to the way we operate here, I think cyclical thinking can really bring interesting thought processes. Well, it's like the huertas in Valencia. These are constructions, space in church, or highly symbolic spaces. So it's interesting to talk about that. So we have a few minutes left, and it would be good if we could open up to the audience if there are any questions. Ida has a question. Firstly, thank you to each and every one of you for the discussion. I wanted to come back to this notion of how we can create an imagination or a collective imagination. So earlier we were talking about development, developing countries. What does that mean to be a developing nation? And in our general mind's eye, it means providing access, unlimited access to resources in a changing notion of time. It's not a set notion of time. And development is very tied to a specific notion of comfort, of consumption and use. So that's the space that we are in. What I would like to know is, from your points of view, as I believe all of you are architects, certainly on stage you are architects, so what can architecture provide, or how can architecture be a way to create new narratives, to create new stories, to shape our own imagination? Again, as architects, as urban planners, how can we create a new narrative? How can we tell our own narrative? Well, I think these narratives already exist. There's no need to create new narratives. We just need to garner more interest in them. Villages that we've been talking about, they have their own narratives. They've got their own levels of comfort. That obviously we could improve comfort with the provision of electricity, but there is a baseline of comfort that they have. But we need to make these living styles appealing or attractive. It's not just a matter of architecture. Architecture is a way of conveying values. And when you have different values, when, for example, you expect to have running water instantaneously, when you expect to be able to have access to products or produce that doesn't come from your valley, well, that changes your notion of comfort. And if we rethink that, then we can create spaces, imaginary spaces, or real spaces. But architecture can only do so much. I think the issue is political, because these narratives that exist but have been forgotten. It's not an architectural issue. It is a political issue. It's one of governance. All of us who work in shaping spaces, we all try and tap into some form of imagination, some form of mind's eye, some vision. And there are alternative models out there. So currently, we're talking about recycling, reusing, repairing, restoring. We're trying to move away from this notion of production and building. We're now looking at ways of taking care of our surrounding environment. And we can also tie in new values. We've spoken a lot about having a more measured approach to our consumer practices, because this ties into an awareness of how fragile our environment is, because we are understanding the natural limits of the planet, and we're trying to not go beyond those limits, but we're trying to just be more aware and respectful of those limits. Well, I agree, but what do you mean by architecture? Is it architecture that sets in stone a current way of life? You can't do anything against that. But if we're talking about architecture as what can architecture do, or what can we do structurally to create a new vision or a new imagination, then there are things that we can do, because here it's about use of space, and there are plenty of examples of creating or looking at different ways of using space. So we need to think about, what is our role? Are we there just to create a building for someone, to set in stone something that exists, a way of life that exists, kind of like what the modernists did? And if that's the type of architecture we're talking about, then there's nothing we can really do. But if we are looking towards other definitions of architecture as a way of opening up to new spaces, new uses of spaces, new ways of tackling issues, the way of creating space around ways of living as spaces of encounters, then this is a type of architecture which can really tie into today's topic. I think it's about exploring other spaces. Not necessarily far off spaces, but other spaces. Because sometimes we want to rethink the way we do things through individual projects. In one of my works, I found it really useful because it opens up a whole new realm of possibilities, a new way of thinking. You explore worlds of ideas that you were so unaware of until then. And going on that journey, that intellectual journey, is very important because it helps you think about things so very differently. And as an architect, the job is to try and take that and get all other people involved in the building process to join you on that journey and to be willing to explore with you. Here we're talking about a profession as an architect. An architect is almost an alchemist. It's what Albert Albert said, it's not just a builder. An architect is a thinker of ideals, of ideas, trying to give shape to that. Maybe an architect is someone who is underestimated. Architects seem to be a bit forgotten in many conversations. But there was an architect who was based in the heart of Edinburgh, and there was a lot of discussion about the role of botanics and trying to regrow the neighborhood. So there was a lot of civic actions there, where you've got the towers that were built there. So there's this interesting new narrative that is being created. And this is a perfect example of things that are much closer to home in the Western world that we can learn from. It's not just examples from worlds beyond. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for a very interesting conversation.
Je vais inviter Shahin à présenter notre invité suivant, que beaucoup d'entre vous
I
connaissent
would just
déjà.
like to quickly introduce our next speaker. Many of you are already probably familiar with her. with him. He'll be joining us remotely.
Bonjour. C'est un grand honneur pour moi
Good afternoon. It is a great honor for me to introduce you all to Attilio Petruccioli, architect, historian, theoretical specialist. Attilio has spent his whole career quite passionately focusing on Islamic architecture and seeing what we can learn from it. He has traveled countries and scales, identifying what makes architecture so unique in specific locations, looking at technologies, looking at architectural practices, gardens, large buildings, looking at all of that and how it ties in with the local geology and landscape. But each time he crosses disciplines as well, looking at politics, sociology, environmental notions, all that goes in to create an architectural understanding. In 1994, he founded the National Institute for Urban Forms. From 94 through to 98, he was professor for Islamic societies in Agaran, a project for Islamic architecture at MIT. From 2003 to 2013, worked at the Polytechnic University in Variani, and then was chair of Civil Engineering and Architecture and director for the doctoral program Architectural Design for Mediterranean Countries. Throughout his years, he worked on promoting the work of university and bringing back architecture into the fore. He was then appointed as chair of Shereb in the University of Qatar. 2024 has been part of the International Network for Traditional Urbanism, founded by the Prince of Wales, and is also an expert advisor at UNESCO. He has published a large number of works, over 30 works, so I won't quote them all here today. I would just like to mention two works. One, Darsi Islam, otherwise translated as Islamic Space, which is for me a leading work in its domain, and I have read it multiple times throughout my own research, and I think every time I am part of a jury, whenever talking about water or one's relationship with the environment, students or candidates quote this work. And having spoken with some of the speakers yesterday, I am quite clearly not the only one to pay such great weight to that work. Another work he produced, Learning from the Islamic Mediterranean Urban Fabric. Another work I would like to draw all of your attention to. And I would like to thank Attilio Petruccioli for being here. The floor is yours.
Two words in French and then I'll switch to English. I want to thank the scientific committee and the organizers of this conference who invited me. I accepted with great pleasure to take part in this conference, especially because I am going back to issues concerning oasis, which I studied as a young man, and that I forgot since. And I'd like to dedicate this discussion to people who are French geographers born in Algiers. I met in the 60s and 70s when I taught at the Polytechnic School in Algiers. At that time, I thought that oasis had limitations. When there was an older expert who told me differently. about oasis. He was closer to reality.
Yeah. So for this reason, I will talk about the west oasis of the Sahara, of the Sahara, the settlements. Et j'essayerai de discuter un peu de cette idée, to discuss these ideas. Okay. Well, I have to be careful not to switch from one language to the other. Bon. I belong to the school of architecture, and I had a great master whose name is Saverio Muratori, and this guy led me into the architecture, the study of the sediments, and the typological studies. In the second, he has written a very interesting book called Territoriaux and Civiltà, Territory and Civilization, in which he enlarged the vision of the architecture up to the landscape, or better the territory that he intends as a sort of relationship in history between the man and the nature, or better, the nature intended as a soil. Since we architects, we deal mainly with the surface of the earth. So in few words, I tried in the last years to put together a system of giving a sense to this idea of the relationship between man and soil. Now, if we consider in general the morphologies that we have, that we can consider that in general four. I mean, the ridge, the slope, the bottom of the valley, and the plains. And they are, in this scheme, they are in the horizontal, in the axis. And then you put in vertical, you can put the sort of typical sediment, the most simple and banal, the small house, a courtyard house or whatever, and then down the elementary neighborhood, big S that you can see on your left, the municipality, and the conurbation. And of course, those functions of those settlements are those settlements pratiquement they are they should be connected also with the other elements that are the roots and also the productive activity that in the traditional world, of course, are mainly connected with the agriculture. If you cross them in every square, what you get is what we can call the territorial type. Of course, all of them exist in the world. But of course, the most balance between the offer of the nature and the questions of the nature, let's say, and the effort of the man to reply to the questions of the nature, those balances are in general are along the diagonal of this scheme. Voila. And also, along this diagonal, you can also realize that this scheme could be synchronical, or if you go along the diagonal from left top to down right, it's also diachronical. Parfait. Et donc, par exemple, ce système couvre un cycle de 4 phases, hein, et se complète en bas et retrouve un moment de crise. Et par exemple, si vous... et typiquement, ça c'est un cycle méditerranéen, c'est-à-dire il y a après le cycle, le premier cycle, vous avez la crise, disons, de l'Empire romain, et le système repart, et se retrouve plus ou moins sur les crêtes. Excuse me, I went to French. And the system, the system replicates, again in a second cycle, starting from the regions and going back in time, along the other. Ça, rapidement, si vous y pensez, if you think about, you will realize that after the second cycle, the disruption of the Roman Empire, we have a return on the hills and in certain cases on the ridge. Très bien. Et après, encore un deuxième cycle de descente, dans lequel on descend. Donc c'est a second cycle. Perfect. Okay. But we move rapidly. And of course, not all the civilizations had the same opportunity. Par exemple, si vous regardez à la diagonale qui s'appelle O petit, là où il y avait la municipalité, alors la possibilité the possibility of changing, is limited only to 2 squares, which is typical of Iran, for instance, where the life can be established on top of the high plateau or on the slopes of that, in two directions, towards the desert or towards the Red Sea. The interesting dans ce dessin-là, c'est le carré à gauche, en bas, c'est-à-dire c'est un type du territoire. It's a type of the territory. It's a type of territory. In which you have the minimum of the offer of the nature and the maximum of effort by the man in order to survive in that environment. So it is the most imbalanced condition. This could be the square, the corner of the oasis, could represent the oasis. when you move from the big scale, the general scale, and you try to study a site, at that point you have to establish a reading of an interpretation of the place, which not only is synchronic, but also diachronic, starting from the present and trying to reconstruct all the process of transformation of that site. In this scheme, I have resumed this kind of operation. Very, very quickly, you have the line, the arrow that goes from left to the right. That is the time. Along the time, you know, the local community has conceived an idea of type, residential type, essentially that give me a second, I can io prendo il pointer, ok, voilà. Là, à ce moment, la communauté, the community has in mind an idea of type, you know. The type is an abstract notion, is a concept. But when you build it, then what basically make are variations of this idea of type. Okay, you adapt the type to the condition of the land, for instance. In the same time, you know, you produce a time that is related to a specific idea of aggregation and a specific idea of a plane of the city. Okay, the three scales are always interrelated. Well, the variations that you have here, they contribute in time. They contribute to the modification of this idea of the type in time. Of this idea, right? Of the type in time. Okay. And of course, this involves the modification of the aggregation. And now the aggregation is made of an old part and a new part. Okay? And then also the plan of the city is made out of an older part that included the old type and the new idea of type. And so on and so forth. And then you can continue until, but this system is not continuous because in the history we have moments of crisis, yes, of delay or even accelerations. In any case, during the period of the crisis, the general type that is in the mind of the collectivity doesn't develop, no, because in the crisis the city doesn't grow, for instance, and they limit themselves only to modify what is existing. At the end of the crisis, what comes out of it is that we have a procedures, a tendency to make the houses, let's say, according to a certain habit that comes from the modification of the the variations of what exists, but the idea of the original of the type is lost. So at that point, in general, the community, they refer to a foreign idea of type that comes from a culture that they consider in a way or in the other superior. This is the case, for instance. This is the case, for instance, of Italy in 19th century. When we imported the idea of the new houses from Paris or Vienna, and this encounter between what the new idea, the new general idea that is imported, and the existing practice creates a new type, and so on and so forth. Now, what I want to say is underline is the fact that we believe that this idea of looking at the site as an historical process, guided by the type, is essential for the real comprehension of the site. At the end of this process of reconstruction, what the type and the site will give to us are the basic principles of the design, and those principles are extremely important there because they are principle of identity of the community, and we cannot avoid them when we design the new aggregation, the new settlement, the new city, the new landscape. Whatever modification we introduce into the paysage. Now the difficulty of applying this reading to the oasis, in my opinion, it depends on two factors. The first one is the idea that we have of the oasis a sort of mythical, abstract idea of something that exists since immemorable times, that is almost immobile, and therefore we have difficulty into establish a sort of dynamic reading, as I have proposed before. The idea is basically that if any movement or any change of the oasis could lead to the death of the oasis itself. As you have seen, the last square has no possibility of moving into another square. These images that you see are based on this idea of the myth, and the myth has some real actually reasons. So you see to the left the famous mosaic of Palestrina, in which this Nilotic landscape is reproduced, and this is the memory of an ancient image, idea of an existing landscape of a sort of humid Sahara that existed up to 7,000 years ago. The memory was still alive in the time of the old Romans, for instance. And of course, to the right we have this memory of that is also written on the rocks in the Tassili region in the same Sahara. La seconde question, c'est qu'en effet, la transformation, the transformation of the oasis, it's not continuous, but it's that it moves from one crisis into another, and I have identified 4 of them, in which the oasis risks to die. Sometimes dies, it is abandoned, or moving from one technique into the other, technology into the other, they can, on the contrary, survive. I try to explain myself better. The problem of the oasis, different from our cities, for instance, is that is based on relations that are extremely complicated, sophisticated, that require an enormous financial effort to keep them alive, with very comparably very little revenue, very little modest result. And all those activities, all those relations are enrooted into the water, into the problem of the water. Everything turns around the problem of the water. Therefore, we can in the evolution of the oasis in the Sahara, and every oasis or group of oases, they have a different evolution that depend on the opportunities they had to move from one technology into the other. In few words, we can say that the transformation of the oasis can be detected through the change of the technology for the captation of the water, captation or catching of the water, captation de l'eau. Okay? Donc, avant cette image, on pourrait désigner l'image the image. I could draw the image of the myth of the humid Sahara. That was a Sahara of lakes, waters, and so on. And then the 7,000 years ago, it starts the process process in which the water, the quantity of the water and humidity is reduced and reduced. Donc, toute l'histoire passe à travers la transformation des technologies pour résister, you're fantastic. You can change as I change. Okay. So basically, all the story is a story of the change of the technology in order to survive and resist in that time. So basically the phases are four. The first phase is the engineering of the riverbed. I call that. It is how to solve the problem that the rivers become dry. The second is the problem of the artesian springs. That is that of catching the springs that artesian exactly. The third one is the ketana. It's the technology that's more sophisticated. That is based on the idea of catching the artesian springs, but that are not anymore visible. Going underground, trying to catch the artesian springs and drain out of the mountain. And even more sophisticated, the last is the fogarai, which is a variation of the third, which is the art of draining microscopic drops of humidity from the underground, from the rocks, conveying all those waters with underground channels into the areas of the cultivation. Basically, we are talking of a sort of hydrotypology. This beautiful image of the Spanish image of the 16th century of the Northwest Sahara and the Maghreb shows very clearly the system of the Azoaric rivers that flow towards the Mediterranean Sea, and the Indo-Aric rivers that flow towards the Talwet, the interior of the Sahara, and in the middle you have the chain of the Atlas. Okay. It is interesting that they depict the Indo-Aric rivers that are in this part, this area. They draw them as rivers that end up in lakes. In reality, those lakes, instead of lakes, they are in reality sort of swampy areas that are called chot or sepka, where at the end the water is absorbed and disappear from the surface. So we have only 3 rivers in the Sahara that are still, let's say, active: the Nile, the Niger, and the Dra. and the dry. All the others, at the beginning, when near the mountains, as in the valley of Vise, they still have certain. They transport certain. They still transport a bit of water. Et donc they produce wonderful agriculture with instruments that are called XAR. They are placed on top of the hills in order to leave the agriculture in the lower part of the valley, so that they can be irrigated by the water of the river. But as I said, at a certain point along the riverbed, the water disappears, and this is typical, for instance, of a river that starts from the Atlas. It's called Saura. The Saura, at a certain point, disappears, and but in reality, the water and the humidities continues to move in three ways. Even we have a flow underground based on the unpermeable strata of the underground. It flows through by capillarity. That means through microscopic, droplets. And finally, and this is interesting, they also, the water arrives once in a while through incredible floods. That means that if on the mountains of the Atlas or in the mountains of the Wardla, on the other side, you have an heavy, exactement, très fort. Ça pourrait être que it could happen that the water will rush through the riverbed and reach distances that could be also 600 kilometers or so. It happens along the route, but it happens also along the river Mazab that comes from the. And therefore, the inhabitants they have to put together several operations in order to take advantage of all those occasions, and therefore the operation that I call engineering of the riverbed means that having equipment that can take the maximum advantage of those three phenomena. For instance, you see to the left basically a dam that crosses the riverbed. This dam has the function of collecting, stopping the humidity, let's say, that goes from drop to drop and collecting some of that humidity that at that point comes out from a little hole, and it is collected as a water. But in the same time also, you can, this tank that you see here, they also have the possibility of deviating, the water that is collected to the edges of the river that can cultivate it. Okay? And then all that can be also accompanied. You can also have in the same time wells that will recuperate from the water table. From the water table, they recuperate some water. So a sort of integrated engineering, that has the maximum, the best example in the Mazar. Before, I just want you to note that this technology is available exactly in the same way outside of the Sahara. For instance, in the desert between Syria and Iraq, where the Umayyads and the Abbasids, they built incredible estates using the same technology. What you say above is the so-called estate of Qasr al-Khair al-Sharqi. That was the royal estate. There was a castle, but there was also a huge farm intended for the production. And down you see the same technology applied in Oman. Donc, je parlais, I was talking of Mozab, which is a region that is established along the river Mozab. It's a pentapolis with five settlements. Of the Ibadites, and that was finally established in the 10th century, more or less. This is a very extremely complicated engineering of all the valley around the river, along the river Mzab, and also its affluents. The system is based on from the point of view of the hydrology. The first event is the flood, and the flood occurs every 15 years, or at least in the 70s when I was there, it occurred every 15 years. Now probably less. So the flood is blocked with dams, 1, 2, 3, etc. And it is blocked by the dam that you see here to the left. That also has a very interesting architectural character, as you can see. That blocks the water, absorbs the heart of the water, and distributes the water into the palm roots. The water is captured and absorbed by the land, and it it will recharge the water table. And invading everywhere. You see, these gear that are channels that also work as a streets. You know, normally, because most of the time are dry, but they in that occasion they convey the water. They in the lowest part, you know, the water invades the plantation, and the various the various street seguia, no, that are there. The chose intéressante is that besides 1,500 wells that are used regularly in order to recuperate the water from the water table during the normal condition of, let's say, it's called aridity. During the flood, you know, you have a small architectures that have the function of taking the water that the floods along the streets and convey the water into the water table, or citern. Voila. You see here the structure. The logic of the settlement follows this necessity and of the engineering of the valley. To the right, you have the settlement, Gardaya in this case, the very famous, that is on the top of the hill. Consider that sometimes these floods reach very levels that are 3-4 meters. So, in order to avoid the flood, the settlement will be on top of the hill. And then you see the various colors. The brown color is the plantation that is already in large part also built, with the houses, and in green the plantation that is still completely devoted to the agriculture. Okay. Perfect. The settlements, as I said, are located on top of the hills in order to protect them from the flood. And the fabric is very tight, mainly residential. There are basically there are only two special elements: the Jama Mosque, that is on top of the hill, that you can see the minarets, and the market that is at the edge, very close to the gate. And the market reminds the fact that also the other component of the economy of the oasis together with the agriculture, that is the Saharan commerce that is led by the nomad. Bon. the Palmeraie. The second technology and the second phase is that we call that artesian springs. There are scattered in the territory, arterial springs that are the result of the pressure of the water table towards the surface, and they appear here and there, and they are scattered but visible. Sometimes, as in the images that I show you in the Fezzan, they can even create small lakes that at that point naturally they become the concentration and the reference of the oasis itself. In other cases, and similar to this, we have a parallel technology that is always related to the idea of these artesian sources. In certain regions, the water table is very close to the surface. And at that point, you can excavate into the center of the desert pots, or reverse pyramids, however you see them, until you reach the level of the humidity given by the water table. At that point, you can plant directly your cultivation on top of the water table. In order, and this technology requires the protection of what I call the pot, let's say. And that is done with the ramifications of the palms that constitute a sort of protection called a fringe. You see here, it's a sort of edge, and this fringe blocks the sand. And avoid, and so that the sand cannot, slow down into the pot. Of course, in time, the basis of the fridge grows, and then more and more the sand tends to go down into the bottom of this pot. At that point, a long work during the night. They have to take the sand and to climb the slope and throw the sand across the fridge. It's called la remonte. And so this gives you the sense of the disproportions or not proportion between the possibilities that are offered by the soil, the nature, and the enormous effort that should be put there in order to make it work. I can now anticipate this issue. The oases are not sustainable at all. In spite of this romantic narration that says that, how sustainable they are in spite of the difficulties and so on. If we look at the investment that is necessary in order to survive there, and the work, and how much work also is sustained by slaves that along the history of the oasis have always been imported from the south. and they are not sustainable at all. This is the point. And I will take again this issue later on. Let's move quickly to the next technology. That as soon as the aridity proceeds, the technologies become more and more sophisticated and more expensive, let's say. We are now, I'm showing you an image of figuig in Morocco. And figuig survives on a technology that is called Ketara, that is based on the, can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Don't
Can
worry.
you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want me to? I just repeat the last sentence.
We heard everything.
Okay.
Thank you.
You are translating?
I'm not. We just cut the microphone, so you're not bothered by the translators. But we can hear you perfectly. Don't worry.
Okay. Figuig, as I said, is a settlement that is based on a sophisticated system of captation of the water that is in a certain way filiated, depends from the previous one, how to catch the artesian sources. But when the artesian sources are not visible anymore, but there is memory that probably in a certain area underground, this water that is not visible and disappeared still exists. At that point, it is possible to excavate galleries and try to catch the water itself. And this is done when you have a minimum of slope, because in general the water table is the concentration of the water in water tables is concentrated there. So they excavate galleries until they reach the water table, and then they can drain the water out of the galleries. In this case, the water, since it's not continuous, but it depends on the events. If you have rains, the water table will be recharged. Otherwise, you have less, and so on. So, since the flow of the water is not continuous, what happens? Two things. Number one, you have to create big reservoirs that you see here, down the village, the settlement, the city. 1, 2, 3. A lot of them, rather big. They are run by the wealthy people of the community, while the poor people that are the descendants of the slaves, the Aratin, they are workers. They have a small plot of land. I remind you that the land has no value in those countries. Only the water has a value. Then the water is sold to the Aratins that work at the land in their plot, and it is conveyed with the sequoias, the channels, to their plot, and they pay with the products of the nature that they produce. The morphology of this settlement in this case is based on the fact that the Czar and the city later on, it sits just on top of the mouth of the Ketara, in order to also to control it and also to demonstrate that it belongs to those people of the Czar. And then you have the various basins, and then to the left all the palmerae, and then the septa. More sophisticated is the Foggara system, even more sophisticated. Foggara and Kettara probably they are the same word, but they have different significance. While the first is based on the distribution of water, based on time, so because you don't have a continuous flow, and then you control, how much water in terms of time. The other one is based on volume. It consists on this idea that the water there's no sources at all, no memory of the sources, but there is the memory, the idea that within the rocks of the mountain, of the hill, are preserved enough humidity that it is worth maybe to go and catch them through galleries, system of galleries that drill the mountain until they can find enough deepness. And in that case, the gallery itself is the collector of those droplets of humidity, and altogether is deposited at the bottom of the gallery in form of a rivulet of water. This rivulet of water is conveyed through underground channels that are enlightened and also marked by a sequence of wells, continuous wells. That is the character of them, and they are called Foggara. The Foggara is not the mountain. The source is very far, and in a certain way, the idea is that the longest the Foggara, the highest the level of the water and humidity water collected, on the way. Therefore, we can have Foggaras that could be also 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers long, particularly in a region of Algeria that's called Gurara, in which the character of the land in general of the area is characterized by a serial sequence of settlements, one next to the other, and they are located at the bottom. If the hill is here, they are located at the feet of the hill in parallel along the line of the sepka that is here. So practically you have 3 stripes. One stripe is the sepka or the chart, and then you have the stripe of the settlement with the plantations here. And then you have a third stripe, which is the mountain, together with all the system of the captation of the Foggaras. In this drawing, we have a very clear drawing of the Foggara, which consists in underground channel. Everybody knows the Foggara, so I don't spend too much time in describing the wells for the light and the elimination also of the raw material for the excavation. It goes under the Xar. It is used for as drinking water and also for the other functions of the water. Then it is distributed through distribution combs into the palmation. And then you have all those little seguias channels that distribute in every in every plot. Every plot then has a margin in which the water is collected. Because here the water arrives continuously. There's no tap, Therefore, you need a possibility. Every plot, every owner has the necessity of collecting the water for different use in different times. As I said, the water is distributed by volume, and so the quantity of the water is determined by this column. One last thing. What happens when the Fogara dries? And this is interesting for the morphology of the territory, because when it dries, you have one possibility that you lower the gallery, and you extend also the gallery, but you also lower. And easily you can reach up, you can go farther into the mountain, and you increase again the quantity of the humidity you can captate. But if you lower the gallery, it happens that the mouth of the Fogara will move down towards the sepka, and therefore you will see that the part of the kasbah moves together, following the mouth. So at the end, when you read a sediment, you will realize that the new part of the kasbah is the one next to the mouth and the one towards the sepka. Or another possibility, when you have a slope that is very strong, and then your sediment cannot move behind this slope, then the mouth goes on and goes into the plantation towards the sepka. At this point, what happens is that the more you move the mouth down, the more cultivate land you lose, clearly, because you can irrigate only by gravity, and therefore the land that you can use is the land that is in the lowest part. In that case, you can recuperate part of the water with a balance that called shaduf, that brings back the water up. As you can imagine, it's a very complex work and requires a lot of time and people. So that is not the top. But this is a clear, interesting relationship that is established between the morphology and the technology that is used. When you reach with the mouth the level of the sepka, at that point, there's no chance that you can survive anymore, because at that point, the balance between cultivated land and the possibility of water that you have is reduced to zero. At that point, you have to the sediment will be abandoned, and you move next to it, and you repeat the same. You establish the same technology, and so on, and you start again. It's a risky operation because not necessarily you will find enough humidity with your drills, but anyway, there's no chance. And this also characterized this typical serial organization of the territory of the Gurara, one sediment after the other. And many that also disappeared. So the mouth of the Fogara. Then you see to the right the use of the dirty waters. I mean, once used for drinking, they are used for various activities of the daily life. And then the scheme of the distribution of the water. This is established, by tradition, and so this is the subdivision of the little channels that go through the calm, and they distribute the water into the Palmeraie. I will go. Last slide, and with very few consideration. Looking at the image above Figuig, next to, very close to the Setka, and of course, testimony of this difficulty of relationship between the man and nature in those conditions, and how much depending on the water, how easily the palm plantation can disappear. And also to the right, the city of Figuig. And you see how many houses are abandoned and the roof disappeared, you know. And slowly how it is abandoned. Now, the issue is this. There is a policy now of the governments that tends to keep the people there. They don't want them to move to the coast in the big cities because they are already crowded and so on. This policy is a policy that goes top down, and that in general follows also criteria that are not very coherent with let's say the way of life, the way of living and the technologies of the oasis. And this creates problems. Paradox is that they can distribute even more water because they use techniques that tend to dry, you know, consume even the fossils waters at a very deep level in the underground. Besides that, I just wanted to insist on this concept. There is a tendency now of assume automatically and mechanically that since the oasis survived those terribly difficult lives, they are sustainable, and therefore. There's a philosophy that suggests that we can introduce these philosophies and those techniques even in the modern city life, even in the Gulf cities. This is, in my opinion, a wrong romantic approach, and that can be also dangerous. It is impossible to think that certain technologies that have that cost in terms of money, work, and lives of people can be introduced into the modernity. Probably from the oasis and its morphological evolution, we can learn an attitude towards saving of the resources, attitude to the attention to the waste, and in part we can also imagine that we can modify certain technologies and adopt them with a lot of attention and care. So this is it. I thank you very much for your attention. I excuse myself because it took too much time and also technological difficulties. Thank you.